Welcome back to Trash and Treasure Garage, where we are jumping into another attempt at trying to wrangle this Jeep. Let me show you where we're starting today. Previously, I got the head off, I cleaned up everything under the hood, and while I was looking at this, keep in mind I did get this thing to cough before, so I know that the CPS, or the crank position sensor here, was working. What I'm looking at is, you see that top hole looks pretty good. That bottom hole is all sorts of boogered up. So what happened is somebody snapped the bolt, and then they attempted to drill it out, and that didn't work, and they somehow wound up with a hole drilled next to the bolt. So my first thought was, let's drill the bolt out and try and retap that, but there's no way we're retapping it. So maybe I can use this hole that they drilled that's in the wrong spot. Well, we can't tilt the sensor because then it won't work right. And I'm afraid, too, that if I drill too much of that out, I'm going to lose the structural integrity there. So here's what I did instead. On the side of the sensor that bolt would go through, I just snipped off the edge of that, and we're just going to run a nut and a bolt through the hole that was drilled and put a big washer on it, and that should be enough for us to crank this down and keep that sensor where it's supposed to be. All right, so there's what I came up with. It's not pretty, but the sensor is firmly in place, and I think it solves our problem. And the right way to fix it would be to drill that hole out and retap it, but with that missing metal, it's a can of worms I'd rather not open. All right, so the next thing I want to do in preparation to get the cylinder head on is chase these cylinder head bolts with a tap, just to make sure that we did not get anything nasty in the threads, especially with the way those old bolts looked on their way out. Now this one right here actually runs through a cooling passage. So this is a good one to make sure we have nice and clean, because we want to make sure we get a good seal here, because this is the one bolt that gets thread locker put on it as it is installed. And not thread locker, I'm sorry, thread sealer. So if that isn't a good seal, you can actually get coolant leaking down into your engine oil. So yeah, we're not tapping threads, we're just cleaning them. And if you can see, the camera will focus on that, we got some ooey gooey nasties out of there. So definitely a very important step, time well spent. I'm going to go ahead and do all of the rest of these. Alright, so everything under the hood is cleaned up and ready to roll. I've got my heater pipe installed but turned out of the way, because once the cylinder head's on, you have to take the water pump off to put that pipe on. So I don't want to have to do that, because I think we've still got a good water pump there. So that's ready to roll there. I pulled the cylinder head off of the parts Jeep and sent it out to be professionally rebuilt. No, I cleaned it up. and this is a budget project, the right thing to do is to send the head into a shop and have it gone through and checked out and make sure it's nice and flat, and probably rebuild it if needed, but we're not doing any of that. I just got it cleaned up the best I could, and we're going to plop it on the Jeep, torque it down with some new head bolts, and see what it does. Oh, these inline 6-cylinder heads are not light. Thankfully, there's dowels that hold this gasket in place. So we got a little bit of a sense of humor here for positioning this without losing the gasket. First, we don't want to slide it too much on the gasket. Let's get in here. Alright. Oh, let me get the back up first. Get you onto your dowels. And judging by the lack of a ridge around the top of the cylinder bores, I'm thinking there is a very good chance that this engine was rebuilt, or is at least a very low miles engine. Jeep says you can reuse the cylinder head bolts once. I decided to go with new cylinder head bolts because it seemed like a good opportunity to do things the right way for once on this project. So new bolts going in, and they're catching the threads, so we must be lined up. The one all the way up in the front here by the temperature sensor does get coated in pipe sealant. I think I already mentioned it, but it just keeps the coolant and oil separate because that bolt goes through a coolant passage and is then open to the oil pan after that. I hear it's bad if you don't seal that and you have coolant going into your oil. So the rest of these just go in dry. After which we'll do something brand new that nobody's probably expecting me to do, and that's open up and read the manual, make sure that we have the torque sequence and any other specifics around that correct. It's, it's kind of an important part of the process to get right. And all the threads caught, so I must have put the head down in the right place. Before I get too much further, I'm going to stop and read the manual, and I'll be right back. All right, so I printed out some directions, so I'll make sure to do this right. The bolt that goes up in this corner here, closest to the temp sensor, does indeed get some thread sealer. I put some Loctite 565 on the threads, and down in the hole it goes. Snug this up. All right, and then we'll start with our first step, which is torquing the bolts to 22 foot-pounds. Which is barely a bump with our half-inch drive torque wrench. All right, so 1284, number 1 is right here. All right, number 2 is across from it. So on, so forth we go. Okay, there's step one. All bolts are at 22. Now we repeat the phone and set them to 45. Right, back on number one. These all go to 110 foot-pounds, except number 11 with our sealer. That goes to 100 foot-pounds. Let's go to 110. There's 110. There's bolt number one. That's a much bigger jump. All right. Whew. Done and torqued. Our next step is reinstalling these push rods into the engine. And one thing I've learned over the years of working on these engines is you do want to be very careful that they go in straight. Because you want to feel that sucker hit the middle of the lifter before you let go of it. Because it is quite possible, I need to clean these a little better actually, it is quite possible to miss the lifter. And if you do that and you get the thing in there sideways, bad things happen to the extent that the push rod could disappear. So don't miss the lifters. That's not a good day. Done it once. That's all the lesson I needed. Those are definitely both where they belong. Just wiping these off as I go. I mentioned earlier that I was wondering if the engine might have been recently rebuilt, given the way that the cylinders didn't have a ridge at the top. But then I'm also looking at, like, there's no way that these are new push rods. Maybe they just did a quick rebuild and didn't replace certain things. I don't know. I guess we'll find out when we run it. How good it runs is really what matters. So see how that started to go sideways? That's what happens if you miss the lifter. So I want to not do that. Of course, some of these will be taller than others because we've got a cam in the engine, and therefore some are going to be on the center and some are going to be on the lobe. So we can't judge whether the one push rod is completely installed based on what its neighbor is doing. Some will naturally just be taller than others. And I'm glad that I cranked the heck out of this motor before I took it apart, because the fact that these are all full of oil and slinging it everywhere is really enhancing my afternoon. There we go. Okay. That's all 12 of those. Now, I did keep all of this in order, knowing that I was potentially reusing it. So, gold star for me. But for right now, we're just going to set these rocker arms on here. This is starting to look like an engine again. That's exciting. My little helper, Grayson, got invited to his first classmate's birthday party today. So he's out doing that, having all the fun, while I'm home doing this. And he is going to be so excited to see the progress on this thing. He is very excited for this Jeep. And I am too. I don't remember if I've told this story, but I had a black Jeep Wrangler before. I've had many Jeeps. I've had mostly Cherokees, Grand Cherokees. The Grand Cherokees just kind of worked out great when I started having kids because they're bigger. They've got headrests and stuff in the back seat, so they're a bit safer. Got more room. It's amazing how much room kids take up. But my last Jeep, pre my first child, was a black 97 Wrangler that I absolutely loved. I actually had it a little while after my first child was born, and it worked. It was tough, but it became time to let it go. And some years later, I had a 2010 Wrangler, but it wasn't the same. And no hate for the newer Wranglers. They did what they had to do to evolve and stay relevant and keep selling Jeeps, but they just don't feel the same as the old ones, and I just don't like them quite as much. And that's fine. I can feel that way. So I'm very excited for this one because it's a whole lot more like the last one that I had that I really liked. And we're so close here. It doesn't look like it, but we're so close. I'm just going to use the impact to do exactly that. We're just going to touch. Should probably wipe the crumbs off that socket before I drop stuff in the oil. We're just going to touch them down to where they go. And when we torque these, we're going to do it in a couple of steps. And what we've got to do is get the, we need to get the cylinder up with both valves closed before we torque them. That way the load is all off. Otherwise, you don't get the right final torque. And the last thing we want to do is come this far only to get it running and then have the valve start, or the rocker arms start rattling around because we didn't get the right torque on them. Or worse, I rebuilt my first 4-liter when I was 17, 16, 17, something like that. And I didn't pay attention to that process. What was that? I didn't pay attention to that process. And I had a bolt break while I was driving down the road. Oh, I see what that was. That was not tightening up evenly. Let's replace that. My next step at this point, following the impact, is to come through here and just get these things so that they're tight enough that the rocker arm is flush on the pedestal. So really just a couple of foot-pounds. In some cases what we're doing, like what we're doing right here, is just opening valves. Obviously if the cam is in a place where that cylinder doesn't have any open valves, they're going to torque right down. But if you're pushing against the valve spring, which most of them we will be, it takes a little more torque. That's definitely not something I wanted to do with the impact. But it's no fun if these bolts break. That's taking the head back off, drilling it out. I don't want to do that. Well, I guess you could drill it out with the head in the vehicle, but metal shavings being what they are, I prefer not to. Okay. Those are all snugged down. Some valves are open. That's good. My next step is to turn this engine over and just watch everything spin and make sure it looks good before we go any further with any of this. And when we finish, we're going to set her to top dead center for cylinder 1 and just work our way down. So as I turn this, I don't know how well it's coming up on camera, but valves are moving. Nothing's binding. Everything feels good. All right, let's bring this around the top dead center. All right. That should be TDC for number 1. So what we're going to do is any of the cylinders that are completely up and closed right now, we're going to set our initial torque here. So the final value is, it's like 19 to 24 foot-pounds. I'm going to start at 10 on a 3/8 torque wrench here. 10 is just to get them snugged. Know that they're all they're both the same. And that's 10. 10 does not take much. All right, so both those are at 10. Now we can bump this to 20. We'll set them to 20 and then go around and double check everything. Alright, that's all of the rocker arms torqued. I'm going to turn it over a few times here and then double check my torque all the way around. And then we'll get the starter hooked up and spin it over and see how we're looking for compression. So I just want to do a quick couple of complete turns here just to make sure that everything has a chance to move. Alright, we should be top dead center on number 1. We're just going to leave this at 20 foot-pounds. Just double check everything. Should all be fine. That's looking good. we'll go ahead and get wiring hooked up, get the starter hooked up, and see where we're at. Wire check. Looking good there. Alright, that wrench out of there. Make sure we don't have anything stupid or expensive getting ready to happen here. We'll take the wrench off the crank pulley. That wouldn't be a good thing to crank it over with that there. Alright, it's all back together with everything torqued down. Grayson, go ahead, turn it over. Alright, so not what I wanted to hear. We don't have compression, or not much of it, which is really strange because I know that the cylinder head came off of a running engine. I know that the cylinder head that we took off of this Jeep had some issues with the mouse nest debris being stuck in the valves. The intake and exhaust are wide open because those manifolds are not on the vehicle, so we don't have anything blocking us on that side. All the valves, everything looked good on this when I was working with it. We have a new head gasket. Everything is torqued to spec. Only thing I'm going to assume is something on at the bottom end at this point. So I think what I'm going to do, and what I probably should have done before I took the cylinder head off of this, is we'll pull a spark plug, and then we'll roll this thing over so that it's at top dead center. And then we'll thread an adapter in here that allows us to pressurize the cylinder and see if we can see where the air's going. I have never had one of these engines argue with me quite so much. These are usually very straightforward to work on, and they're such simple engines that it's driving me nuts that we're having this level of difficulty. But so this is going to thread into the plug hole. All right, so I paused recording real quick to go find the right adapters to make this thing work, but we just essentially have a hose that connects to shop air that will pressurize this cylinder through the spark plug hole. So I've got this rotated so that the valves are closed. I'm going to open up this valve. Looks like my exhaust valve is not fully sealed. So let me roll this over and see if that changes any. All right, so my valves are fully shut. I paused for a second there because the compressor kicked on. I've definitely got air coming out of the exhaust valve. I am leaking a little at the plug hole here, but also some from the intake side. So is it possible that this head is also bad? That's kind of where the test is leading us. All right, so next test here, I'm going to pull these rocker arms back off as soon as I find the correct socket. And we're going to give these valves a little love tap a few times here with the hammer, or with the dead blow, or a rubber mallet in this case, I suppose. See if we can get them to seal. Because this Jeep did sit for a little while, but I drove it into its final resting place, so I'm a little confused as to why it's suddenly no good. All right, so got my mallet here, and we're gonna see if that changes anything. I sprayed a little PB blaster in here so that you can kind of see what's happening. But when I feed it air pressure, that smoke coming out of the intake port there, that is not what we want to see. There's no reason that valve should be open right now. So what I'm going to do is give it a few more whacks here and see if we can help free this up. Sometimes if there's something stuck there, that will help it release. Alright, so now that I've done that a few times, we're going to take the tool off. We're going to put the compression tester back in, and we're going to see if we're making compression on that cylinder now. If we are, then I have a feeling I know what I'm doing for the other 5 cylinders. Alright, turn the key now. Okay, so holding my hand here, I can actually feel it pulling and pushing air. So that tells me about what I need to know about the approach for the rest of this engine. So after all that, I was able to whack these valves a few times with the rubber mallet and get them to seal up just fine without the valve train on it. But as soon as I put it back together and spun it over, it's not making any compression again, and I'm seeing something kind of interesting. So we're at top dead center on cylinder number 1. Right, the valve train is torque to spec. Both of those valves should be fully closed. Watch this. If I start to loosen this nut on this rocker arm, watch this valve. See that coming up? The valve didn't fully close until I got that rocker arm like substantially loose. So we've got something going on where there might be a difference between the years in the pushrod length or the rocker arm ratio. I'm going to go take a look at the parts that came off of the old engine, because this is the cylinder head off the old engine, or this is the cylinder head off the donor engine. But the push rods and the rocker arms I kept from the 97 engine that's in the Jeep. So we have a 93 cylinder head on a 97 block. Something must be different. I'm going to go investigate. Alright, so I'm going to take the rocker arms back off of cylinder number 1. I'll just kind of set these off to the side. First thing I want to do is take a push rod out. So here's a push rod from the 97 engine. Here's a push rod from the 93 engine. 94 engine. The cylinder head's stamped 93, the Wrangler's 93, the donor's a 94. It's all 90s Jeeps. These push rods are the exact same length, only the one that came with it is in better shape. So that's not going to be it. But I am wondering, or I'm hoping, that the rocker arms are different, because if the rocker arms are different, that's a nice easy fix. If there's some difference in the cylinder head, or the gasket's wrong, or something like that, that's more. So I'm going to put the 93 rockers on here, but they already look like they're sitting too high, just like the ones that came off of it. So let's start bolting these down and see what the valves do. The valves start to open again. I'm at a little bit of a loss, and I'm going to need to go do some research here. But I would expect that at top dead center, we should be able to tighten these all the way down without those valves opening. Valves open, we don't have compression. We don't have compression, we don't have a running engine. Let's snug these up. Alright. I'll get you zoom back in here so we can watch, see what that valve does as we tighten this up. And I'm already seeing the valve is starting to compress. I will finish tightening them down, but there's 20 foot-pounds. Now I have a feeling we're still not going to have compression. I also lost my little helper. I'll hook the battery back up. I'll go and kick it over myself. Yeah, nothing. Consider me confused. I was really hoping that violence was going to be the answer there, but it turns out it wasn't. Anyway, I know that my valves seal up without the valve train on, so that's good. Hopefully that head does not have to come back off, but I'm a little stumped.